got an old market.
Really?
It's one of the things that I think is really interesting. If you look at the popularity of farmers market these days, and we're like, oh, it's the thing, and it's a big growing industry, and Washington State's now taking notice, and King County's now taking notice, like, oh, there's a little more movement happening with changing the laws for the health department stuff to make it a little easier for farmers markets, because it's, with volume comes a little more pressures to work with the organization as a whole with markets across the state. But really, that's all happened just in the last decade, I'd say. And I was looking back at this. The Vashon Farmers Market began in the early 80s.
It's great.
And it didn't become a little more official until it says in 1990 it moved to the current site. So it's been there now for what?
90, it's 27 years. It's been in the Village Green.
That's huge.
It's a long time. How long have you been involved?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
And what got you involved? How did you get started as the president? Is that what we call it? What is it?
Market manager.
Market manager, okay.
Market manager. I was intrigued by the position when I first moved back to the island 8 years ago. And I did a little research into it and didn't quite fit my lifestyle. Thank you. Didn't quite fit. Also, the sanity sounded a little bit lacking from some of the people who've been involved in the organization. There was a little bit of chaos, and I was like, I don't need that right now. And then a few years later, someone brought it to my attention that they had posted another help wanted sign, basically. And Nan Wilson was the president of the board at that point.
Got it.
And she and I knew each other a little bit, and she had a conversation, and she's a highly successful business owner, runs her own company. And very creative.
I know Nan. Nan's great.
And so she really, I think, provided a little organizational stability in her role there, and had some vision for where it was going, and she convinced me that it was the right time for me to join up and be part of that. And
she's very enrolling. Nan is very convincing.
She's very good at that.
She's really good
at that. But I was
that.
kind of looking to be convinced. So, trying to find ways to stay on the island and to work on the island. So.
She's the president of the Vashon Island Growers Association.
She was.
Right.
She was.
So so there's the Vashon Island Growers Association, and then you're the market manager.
Correct.
And the Growers Association consists of who?
Well, the Vashon Island Growers Association is a 9-person board that runs a 501c3 nonprofit on the island.
Great.
His mission is to promote and advocate for, I should probably have this memorized, but local agriculture, basically, in a nutshell, and to create a sustainable agricultural economy on Vashon.
Great.
And they do that through a few things, including a vibrant farmers market. They also do several different educational things, and they do some services for collaboration and facilitation of local agriculture.
Great.
So that's, in a nutshell, that's what it all kind of looks
Great.
like.
And you essentially work for Viga.
Yeah.
Great.
Viga's my boss.
Viga's your boss.
Yeah.
Great.
So they hire me as the market manager to operate the farmers market in accordance with their mission.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, good. So then you got involved. So then you wanted a job on island.
It was something intriguing. I've done a lot of. I mean, I put myself through college in hospitality. I've done wedding planning. I've done special events. I've done that kind of stuff. And so this is like a big event. You do it. And so I was like, well, I can do that. I know how to do that. And so it also has a great history and culture. So when I got involved, there had been 5 market managers in 4 years before me. There is definitely some turmoil. Not a lot, but a little bit. And yet, this market has vendors who've been there for 20 years. Who cares? Another market manager, whatever. We're still going to show up on Saturdays.
Right.
So it's got great kind of structural stability. And my job the last several years is, well, how do I actually get out of the way and just help that happen?
Yeah.
And what do they need? And what are the things they do? And so, starting off with just kind of cleaning up the operational side, first couple of years of figuring out how to streamline that and make it take a lot less time. And we hired a bookkeeper, and she and I have worked a lot on how to really try to spend as little time as possible on the vendor side and on our side dealing with the actual paperwork and the books every week. And so that's gotten a lot better.
Great.
And it's also simultaneously gotten more complicated because the food access program, which is run by Marilee Runyon, and she's an ex-board president and also longtime Viga member, That's like the Food Access Program is another project under Viga. And they, the first thing that they did was they got the farmers market to be licensed to accept food stamps. So that was the first thing that happened. That was a while ago.
That was really exciting, actually. That
was awesome.
Awesome.
And yet there's like, okay, so what else do we do and how does that work? And so there's been all this work that's grown off of that. And so now there's incentive programs, and now we also take the WIC checks. And there's...
What kind of incentive program?
Well, if you bring your food stamp card, your SNAP card to the farmer's market, we'll match the first $10. So if you swipe your card for $10, you get 10 little
more
tokens that you get to go spend at the market, and then we match them with these fresh bucks. We actually, as of 2 years ago, before then, we were matching with our own little fake money. But they did a bunch of work, and actually with 9 other farmers markets in King County, they applied for and received a grant from the federal government to fund the program for 4 years. And so now we have these official fresh bucks that you can spend at any one of those 9 markets, and where you get those to. And they're a little more. There's a lot of 2 years of negotiating from each market and this, that, and the government and what they can be spent on. But they're a little more focused. The food stamps are anything that is not ready to eat, any food products that's not ready to eat. So you can buy fish, you can buy dairy. The fresh bucks are just produce, mushrooms, fruit, vegetable starts.
Right.
That's it. But still, it's great. It's awesome. And so people can come in. There's a lot of people on the island who use it as a regular thing. They can double their money, and if they come every single week, they can get an extra $40 a month, and
that's great.
So that's really cool. So they've been doing stuff, and then they've continued to grow in other ways too, which I see the trickle down effects of. They now have increased their financial capacity and their sponsorships and grants and things they're doing. So they now have funding to give money to 7 different nonprofits on the island. And so they give these coupons to shop at the farmer's market. And those organizations either use them for their own operations, like the care center, use it to buy food for their meal program. But Youth and Family Services gives them away to families in need. So if someone comes to them, Interfaith Council for the Homeless has them, La Comunidad, so they all come to them. And so people need those. So I'll see those showing up in the market.
That's cool.
So of course that adds to the operational, but we didn't have the ability to even do that kind of stuff without creating a little more stability.
So when those bucks come in, the farmers collect them, and then you pay them back in real money.
Right. So they do a little accounting with me at the end of every market, and we do 2 eyes on it. We count it twice. We sign off and yada yada, that kind of stuff, and make it all work.
Well, tell me about the big drip, the big picture stuff. Tell me about the stuff.
Well, so some of the things that has been heard about, and some of the stuff that people know about, we had a bunch of questions about a new building. That's one of the things that come. The market is growing, and the way that it's growing, and the things that the island is seeking, the interest in local food is growing, the consumer demand for stuff is growing. And from all of that, it's become pretty clear that we're going to outgrow, if we haven't already, outgrown the Village Green space. And because of the density of construction in downtown, there's not a lot of room to expand there. As part of all this, before we really kind of defined the problem, we did some research, we did some looking in. We got a grant to work with some architectural students from UW, and they created a little, what if we built this new structure on the Village Green? What would that look like? And we presented that to the community. We got feedback, a couple years of back and forth, and hearing a lot of Islanders' concerns about keeping it a green space and this and that. We don't have any desire to change that, but we also want to figure out how to not curtail the possibilities, especially for local Islanders working locally and supporting our. I think that's awesome, and the more we can have of that, the better. That's also part of what keeps it such a fun place. I mean, we have people doing all sorts of crazy things here, and that's what makes Vashon Vashon.
Right.
So we've been looking at what's possible, and we don't have, there's a lot of concern, like, are you going to build a big structure on the Village Green? And no, we're not. That wasn't ever really the plan. It was one step in the learning process of figuring out what we needed. But it's become pretty clear that we've outgrown that space. If not immediately, definitely in the short.
It's foreseeable.
It's in the soon. So it's like, okay, so what's the next step? And we don't quite know what that next step is, but we are much more actively looking at options. We're having conversations with people with property on the island, and we're looking at locations, and we're looking at things that can do stuff, and we're also trying to figure out what role exactly Viga should have in this next iteration. How involved should Viga as an organization be? Should it just create a forum, or should it provide more services to producers Should it do more for publicity? Should it do more for outreach? Should we plan more events? Like we're trying to figure out what exactly the direction to go is, and that's a lot of talking to people, a lot of thinking about it. I'm asking more pointed questions of bigger markets in Seattle. Well, why did you make the choices to do what you did? And personally, with the goal of, I don't want to force the issue. I have no desire to kind of make it some sort of corporate entity that's creating all these local products. No, not at all. But if the goal is to not ever have to say no to a new vendor who fits our rules, which is, everything at the market is made, grown, processed, created on Vashon.
Right, that's the rule.
We have a few small exceptions. Seafood is an exception. Right. There has to, but again, they have to have a strong tie to the community and they have to prove it. So, we've had several applicants that I've turned down. We have people that come to the market and I say, you don't fit. But I also hate it when I have to say no to someone who's got a great idea and I don't have a room for them. I can't fit them, or they have some requirements for their product that I can't meet. We've got a couple people who are only with us kind of at the guaranteed pretty season, and yet they're not there in April, May, maybe in June, depending, and they definitely aren't there in November and December, and maybe not in October, which is like half of our market or more.
Right.
And so figuring out what we can do to create that new space. And I don't know exactly what area it's going to be or what it's going to look like.
Super exciting.
But it's so exciting. And you start to look at what other people have done. I mean, you look at the Art Center. For me, that's inspiring. It's like if that could, what we're looking at is so much smaller than that. If that could happen, then give it a couple years, few years. Chances are good if we found something we get the community excited about. There's no reason why we couldn't make it happen. Yeah. And we will, as a nonprofit, have we'll have to do some local fundraising, but there's additional options for funding from other sources. So that's some of the big picture stuff that's kind of exciting.
It's so cool. Good. So, and nothing imminent, but it's all in the...
Yeah, and people get concerned, and occasionally someone will approach me at the farmer's market, like, you're going to rip down the village green, or you're going to, Like, no, we have no desire to do that. The whole point is to create something that is continuing to build the community.
Right.
And support all the local businesses and to fit into the vibe, and yet recognizing it's going to grow. And so where do we do that? How do we do it well?
Great.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So that's
and about how many people you think, you got a percentage or a guess of, excuse me, how many people show up from off island or?
This is such a great question. I would love to know the exact answer to that. All I have is gut instinct by faces I recognize and faces I don't recognize. And yet we have, there's people move to the island who I don't know.
Right.
I think that in what I call the shoulder season, which is those beginning and ending months, it's a lesser amount, somewhere between a quarter to a third probably. Mm-hmm. But, on a busy 4th of July weekend and sunshine,
it's got to be 3/4 off island.
It's a big chunk from off island. Yeah. Somewhere between half and 3/4, I would say. We have a lot of very powerful and not powerful as in like the money they're spending, anything, but just in their dedication and in their commitment to the farmers market, local islanders who come and show up.
Yeah.
However, as it gets bigger, the biggest thing I hear is people are like, I don't want to come to Vashon town on a Saturday.
Right.
It's too crazy. It's too busy. And I have to say, that's one of the big things I hold is like, wouldn't it be awesome if the next iteration was still accessible to all the people who are currently shopping at the market, but did it in some way that was just a little less chaotic, a little easier to get to.
Right.
Parking wasn't as much of an issue. What if we could find that spot that balanced those?
That'd be interesting.
So that all these people who maybe would shop there that are locals, but don't because of the chaos factor, find that the chaos factor was diminished to the point where they would start coming on Saturdays. Because we have people that we don't see anymore.
Right.
Especially, we have some vendors who've been there 20 years, 8 years, 15 years. And they're like, yeah, well, I don't see so-and-so anymore, and I don't see such and such so anymore. So, but we definitely have a lot of local shoppers, and then of course that there's some interesting trends happening across the nation, happening across the state, in what consumers are purchasing. More interest in pre-prepared foods, whether it's something like cashew cheese or even not the hot foods, but even like a bag of frozen tamales, so you don't have to make lunches late this week. Patty sells those, and her sales on those sorts of things, we can track it. We know those are going up. People's interest in not cooking so much is going up. And
Blue Apron phenomenon.
Exactly. And so finding the balance between educating and making sure that there's still awareness and connection to straight agricultural products, buying turnips, but also collaborating with local business and entrepreneurs to allow them to offer those other things that people want.
Fabulous.
Trying to find that balance.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Good. Well, anything else you want people to know about the farmers market, or anything else you want to?
The farmers market, I mean, on top of some of the excitement that I have, I mean, I went to school for development and figuring out how to fit that into, my island and living here and support my family and all that kind of stuff. The farmers market just has such an amazing feeling, right? Yeah. You walk into the farmers market, and I've been to markets all over. I've now taken made a point to visit a lot of farmers markets, and some of them are they're just a sales venue. And some of them have a little bit of sparkle or a little bit of shine, but they're also just, they're flat, they're monotone.
Yeah.
And maybe they do the one thing they do that really well.
Yeah.
And there's local food and it's supporting, a change in consumption, about awareness of where food, like that's great. But our market is so much more than that. And the fact that people come and they linger and they chat and they hang out. I got invited to be a Google guide, as I'm sure everyone is being invited these days, to add your pictures to Google Maps or whatever. But one of the little things it tells you then is it tells you little stats about a location. And so it tells me, well, did you know that the Vashon Farmers Market, the average person stays there between 20 minutes and an hour? And I was like, well, that's interesting. I do my own little customer counts, but it's nice to have some collaboration. And I know that comparing that information to a close friend of mine runs the University District Market, so we share stats sometimes, and their average customer is there for like 15 minutes. People don't stay there; it's in and out, and so
that's interesting.
There's this.
It's such a teeny little space, but I can go to space. You got the music, and people are out for the day.
And people, I mean, as much as there's that chaos side that some people don't like, there's also the fact that if you want to go out with your kid for a little bit of time on Saturday, you get your shopping done, you see your neighbors, you catch up on the local gossip, you hear about something, you have a sandwich.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's got this great vibe and a great feeling, and I love the time that I spend there. Like, it doesn't feel like work.
Right.
It's like, I mean, there's work to do there, but it's just so joyful.
It's great. It really is.
And that's
I agree.
Whatever else I do. That's like my number one. Like, don't mess that up, right? Like,
don't mess up the
vibe. That's the magic, and I inherited that, and I've worked really hard to listen to the vendors about like how do we keep that. And the vendor community is absolutely amazing, and I think that's maybe one of the final things that we really hit on. The vendors who are on this island who have been doing agriculture, doing small business work, getting up at the crack of dawn, loading their trucks up, driving down, unloading, setting up a tent, putting it all out there.
In all weather.
And the consistency to create the trust that it's there every single Saturday and people can be there has created something that is just amazing. You don't see that sort of that power creation very often. It's, you have to drive a ways to find that again. And I think that's definitely one of the best parts of the farmers market. And if if anyone comes out here, they got to visit. They got to stop by the farmers market, get a taste. It's like Vashon boiled down into a little 4-hour window.
Yeah, it's very cool. I would just tell you, as a customer, I love it. It is one of those rare things on Vashon that's like, okay, well, where you can go and hang out and run into people, and it's centralized, you can do other things while it's fabulous. It's just really fabulous.
And I always see people like arranging meetings there. Like I'll see it like, oh, let's they do the shopping, like, oh, hey, let's sit down, and they chat and they do their little business or whatever. And it's
great.
Like,
yeah, it's really great. All right, now, well, I really appreciate you taking the time and being here, and thanks for the work you're doing.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, you're welcome.